Ah, there you go. Ian's shared it. Yeah,
I've got it.
Right, there you go.
I've got the copy of it, Robbie, so I've just put it up.
Right, yeah, I altered it, I did, but it doesn't matter. We'll go with this one.
You okay with that, Ian?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Right,
Robbie,
guys.
just tell me when to move on.
Guys, we've got Robbie delivering a presentation on Legionella. Robbie is a guru, is the best word I would use to describe Robbie, a guru in the industry for Legionella. And if you've not heard him before, you're in for a treat. You're going to learn something. You get some good nuggets out of today. So I'll let Robbie crack on.
Ian, you change the slides for me, yeah?
Yes, I will do, mate.
Okay, right. If you have the next slide, then please.
Oh, hang on. Give me a second. I might not have it the right way. Start talking, Robbie. I'll eventually catch up. Don't worry.
Okay. Just to give you a little bit of background, I think this is very, very important point. I mean, if you look at the pandemic at the moment and how it's spread through people coughing, so they produce a spray, and that spray then can infect other people quite easily. Okay, very similar to Legionella. And if I give you a simple example, for example, a spa bath, then you're all sitting in the spa bath, you're talking, okay, but your face, your nose and your mouth is very close to the surface. And what do we have in all spas? We have aeration. We've got air blowers which blast air through the actual water system, and then we've got turbulence created. So we are forming a very fine mist spray, an aerosol spray, and that is absolutely perfect for Legionella. Absolutely perfect for Legionella. Once you breathe in that Legionella, if the water is infected, it goes straight into your lung. And microorganisms are simple organisms, but they're very, very sophisticated. So what happens is once that gets into your lungs, it knows the temperature of your lungs, it knows the pH of your lungs, it knows everything about your lungs, okay? And it just goes off like wildfire. A little bit of a technical hitch, sure.
There you go. That should be better.
There we are.
Yeah,
okay.
Should all have it now.
Okay. Can you change slide, please? Now, if we look at the Legionella, it's a very small, very, very small microscopic bacteria that lodges in the lungs, as I just said. Next slide, please.
You should have the next one now.
Yeah. Now, there is legal requirements. First of all, under the 1974 Health and Safety at Work Act, then the Management of Health and Safety at Work, specifically control of substance hazards to health, and that comes under biological risks. Then we've got a document from the Health and Safety Executive, L8 approved code of practice, and then we've got another one, which is HSG 282. All of these you can draw up just by Googling in, and it's very valuable information. Next slide, please. So that legal requirement is such an important point. To comply with regional regulations, duty hurler is required for, next one, please. Identifying and assessing source of risk, prepare a scheme to prevent the control or risk, implement managing and monitoring precautions. Don't forget about training. Training comes under this umbrella. Keeping records of precautions, appointing a manager to be responsible for others or a contractor, a responsible person, competent person. Next slide, please. HSG 282, this is specifically for spa baths, not spa pools, spa baths and hot tubs. There is a document by PUTAG on hot tubs, and I'll just give a little heads up on that as we go along. This is the latest guidance. Remember, you need to identify your site-specific risks. If you don't have pipe work plan, it's highly recommended you update it as a priority, so you know where things are going. It's like in pools, safe operation of pools, you have a schematic at minimum of where your water is circulating. You've got your blowers, etc. in that, and I'll come on to that a little later again. When in doubt, contact your environmental health officer or any Legionella consultant company. It's so important. If you don't understand it, you must get these people who are experienced. Just give you another heads up. Okay, I went to one leisure centre, yeah, in South Wales, and they had a Legionella risk assessment by an independent company, and they didn't even see as far as a risk. So make sure they're competent. Then you identify once again where the risks are. Change the slide, please. Now, Legionella pneumophila has species. Now, I don't want to go into too much depth, but Legionella pneumophila has got various species, and 6 of these have been linked to disease in humans. And the main one is Legionella 0 group 1, which is the most serious and responsible for the most infections and, God forbid, fatalities involving Legionella. Next slide, please. Now, I want to move on to a very critical part of this presentation. It's biofilms. Biofilms are so important. They are a key factor in the proliferation and the actual infection of people with Legionella. Next slide, please. So let's have a look at biofilms. Now, biofilms, they're an organic ecosystem. So they multiply very rapidly, often seen like a jelly-like substance, might give discoloration of water, things like that. So the role in provision of hygienic conditions for all water-based systems. So that means that nearly all bacteria, when they're in a biofilm, have got protection, and they can expand, they can develop, they can multiply very quickly. They develop very rapidly in conducive conditions. Poor disinfection, and obviously pH, poor hygiene by bathers, poor housekeeping by the actual operators, and then they have the correct temperature range for them to multiply, for the biofilm to grow. And obviously, we are talking all about these things that are coming down on this slide, plus nutrients, is perfect for a biofilm development. And then we have these Legionella bacteria hiding within this biofilm, this huge jelly-like ecosystem. Next slide, please. Now, microorganisms, or organisms that are too small to see with the naked eye, are the building blocks for biofilms. Different species of bacteria and other microorganisms, protozoans, for example, algae, yeasts, and fungi can form in biofilms. With most biofilms ranging from a few microns to hundreds of microns, 1 micron is 1 millionth of a meter, so you can't see them, in thickness. Next slide, please. So what's needed to start the biofilm? Generally, all you need are suitable, like we said, conditions on the last slide. Surfaces submerged in water or some other aqueous solution. I discovered Legionella bacteria down in the local steel company in a milling machine. We had a fine spray of fluid being sprayed to cool this particular implement down, and Legionella was harbored there. Microorganisms and favorable conditions. Next slide, please. Furthermore, there are factors that can affect the biofilm attachment: the availability of nutrients, body fats, skin particles, phosphates from pool or other chemicals, and general organic contamination. The physical and chemical characteristic of surface. So some people think if you've got stainless steel, for example, a biofilm won't grow. That's not true. The only reason you have stainless steel in food preparation, for example, because it's easier to clean. Pipe material, sand grains, balance tank and overflow channel surfaces, stagnant water in the system. We'll come back to pipe material. The pipe material involved in these spas that are imported from the USA and China and places like that, okay, we got to be very careful because they have corrugated pipework, and I'll come on to that a little later. Lack of constant, sufficient, effective disinfectant and incorrect pH. Sorry, repeating myself. Ineffective water flow, pool hydraulics in the pool or spa system. This can lead to dormant areas, you know, and if you think of the classic example, in an internal water supply distribution system, a dead leg. There's no disinfectant reaching it, there's no clean water reaching it, so that's where the biofilm will grow, and it'll slough off into the actual water system. Wet contaminated surfaces, and I've got my doubts about inflatables, for example. Next slide, please. So what's needed to start a biofilm again? With the microorganisms, often at the mercy of their environments, it's amazing how something as small as a bacterium can hold on to a surface to settle in its new home to develop rapidly into a biofilm. So once it gets that site, it can attach to the actual site. This is why correct cleansing, chemically, superchlorination perhaps, and physically cleaning, scrubbing are vital, okay? So it makes you think about the internals, you know, to make sure that you haven't got these stagnant areas where water's not flowing. Next slide, please. And this is a classic slide. You can see the bacteria on the left-hand side, free floating. They think, well, I've had enough of this way of living now. I'm going to attach myself, and I'm going to call in some more colleagues, and we're going to grow. The second one is, you can see the slide here, where this biofilm is growing now, okay? So the biofilm grows, it reaches a critical point where it actually bursts open, and these bacteria, which are multiplied massively, go into the circulation system. Next slide, please. Now, this is another example of how sophisticated they are. You can see, I want you to note the channels within this biofilm now, where nutrients are flowing through, and the actual bacteria, once they grow to that critical point, can slough off back into the main flow of the system. Next slide, please. And this is a micrograph of a biofilm, which is, you know, quite advanced in its development, and it can, you know, in physical terms, it'll be a slimy mass. Next slide, please. And this is another micrograph of micro picture, sorry, of the actual biofilm, and you can see quite easily here the channels where the water can flow through. Next slide, please. Now, biofilms are like cities. Similar to city dwellers, microorganisms pass up a solitary floating life to live communally as a part of a biofilm. It's analogous to cities of microbes. To understand how the cells in the biofilm interact, they signal each other. As they grow in, they signal each other. They become very robust to protect themselves. So you can attack them with high levels of free chlorine, for example, and very often, you know, it won't have a significant effect. You have to physically clean it, and you have to superchlorinate it to very high levels of free chlorine, sometimes up to 50 parts per million. The biofilm will also chemically and genetically connect to the community to ensure the survival and future separate growths. So they'll slough off and form another biofilm. They're very sophisticated communications network within this biofilm. Next one, please. Next slide. The management and control of biofilms is very important for all walks of life. For example, you've got biofilms in your mouth at the moment, which are harmless, but they do provide bacteria, some good bacteria and bad bacteria to survive. They can cause health hazards, and they help to protect colonies of bacteria from lots of different treatments that would otherwise kill the individual or free-floating bacteria I just mentioned. The biofilm acts as a very effective hideout for bacteria that can be very difficult to remove. Next slide, please. Legionella and other bacteria, these are closely linked to biofilms. Biofilms serve as microbial reservoirs. Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which we've all come across, is a very common bacterium living within the biofilm. Now, why is that significant? Because Legionella are, once again, very sophisticated. They can live in Pseudomonas sacrificially. So you kill the Pseudomonas and it releases millions of Legionella bacteria. Can lead to infection by Legionella pneumophilia by living within the Pseudomonas. Pseudomonas can also lead to very severe skin and eye infections. And all this now is living within the biofilm. Next slide, please. This was a study done by a guy called Richard Muger, and what they were looking at was, how the Legionella pneumophilia was promoted and its growth within a biofilm matrix. And what it said was, on the basis of the study, it was concluded that although Legionella pneumophilia was not capable of growth in the absence of a host, this organism could survive within a biofilm matrix. So what we're saying, it's got two options. It could live within the Pseudomonas aeruginosa, and also it could live within the biofilm itself as well, because it's protected, and in those cases, it would have been free floating and bursting out of the biofilm. It was demonstrated that the presence of biofilms in potable and healthcare facility water systems can provide a means of survival of dissemination of Legionella pneumophilia, dead legs in these critical healthcare provisions. Next slide, please. Risk to our industry. Simply put, if biofilms are not prevented from infecting these systems, they can rapidly develop into high-risk unhygienic colonies. And huge numbers of bacteria can grow and they'll be sloughed off. If left uncontrolled, we'll cast it into these systems and infect exposed bathers in our leisure provisions. For example, pools, spas, interactive play features, showers, etc. Common ones are there. So you might be after a pandemic doing all the things that you need to do. You go back in, you haven't checked that the water systems have been checked and safeguarded against Legionella. The design is good. There's no standing water, etc. And once you reopen, you might not be infected by COVID, but you might very well be infected by Legionella. Both can lead to death. Next slide, please. Note and address immediately. The boundary layer where the biofilms sit in a place where biocides are quickly consumed and slowly renewed unless there's a massive dosage. This can be a key for operators to note. What we're saying is, and the other things, the key messengers, the key points that you want to look for, musty smells around a spa, for example, a spa plant room, cloudy water. The high unexplained use of disinfectant in any aqueous solution can be a key indicator that a biofilm is growing in the system. As I just said, I can't overemphasize it. You're banging this free chlorine in, or God forbid, total active bromine, and your pH is changing, then you could find, it could be likely that you've got a biofilm growing in your system with a high Legionella risk. Next slide, please. These biofilms communities grow so rapidly that they reach a mass where the common chemical disinfectants cannot stem the growth. Repeated myself, it's so important to understand. Next slide, please. And just to give you a heads up for your spa baths, your interactive play features, I mentioned that because I measured this the water temperature of interactive play feature once, and it was 36 degrees centigrade. Open air, absorbing the heat on the surface, that was transferred to the water. So you had, surprisingly high temperature of the water circling in those interactive play features. So we can see here in the red zone, that's instant kill or kills very quickly. That green zone in the middle, that is the classic one. And, we've all heard the stories where some spas and hot tubs are running at 40 degrees centigrade. For God's sake, what they're doing. And then down below that, you've got up to 20 degrees centigrade. Bacteria will survive. It's not dead, it's dormant. So it's it's everywhere. It's in lakes, it's in rivers, it's underwater, under ice, yeah. So it can remain dormant, but once it reaches a conducive environment, particularly temperature, it can thrive again. Next slide, please. Spas an example. Now I'm going to go through this system with spas, but it applies to so many different facilities, which we just start mentioning. Okay, interactive play features. I've got reservations about inflatables, for example, because when we did a test with real-time testing, we had this spa blown up because they had a Pseudomonas infection, and you could see the bubbles bursting out the seams, constant blow. So if that air can burst through, and inside of these inflatables, we've also looked in there and we found a huge biofilm in one of those as well. So it's examples of where Legionella is waiting for. It's a perfect environment. Next slide, please. Just a simple spa system. I'm sure you're all aware of it. Just to go through it though. So what you've got a filtration system, then you've got a separate booster massage system, yeah? Then you've got an air blower, which I treat as 3 systems. They all must be monitored and cleansed. So for example, if you're looking at the air blower, common sense, basic, you would look at the actual air supply to that air blower. Is there any potential for Legionella bacteria, in aerosols in that area? Are the nozzles actually kept clean? The second one is the booster system. Now the booster system acts separately. Okay, it's a separate system from the main circulation system. So we need to make sure that the nozzles are clean, that the pipework is effective and clean. All those sort of things should be looked at. Okay, and then we got the main circulating system. And the key point there is, I don't recommend, and I don't think PUTAG recommend either, that we have a skimmer system for a spa. It's got to be a deck level system, because that is the most effective way of getting rid of the surface pollution, as we all know. And the tanks, the walls, etc., they're a risk area. Next slide, please. First of all, a spa is not a swimming pool. Second, next one, please, Ian. Generally high water temperature, up to 40 degrees, as I mentioned. Relatively high bathing load. Just be careful, because you've got quite an intense bathing load for that small volume of water. Low water volume, aeration of water, aerosol spray is constantly, when it's in use, being given off, unless you've got the blowers, the air blower and the hydromassage not on. Disinfectants can quickly be depleted, as we all know. Also potentially much higher relative pollution. Ideal conditions for bacterial growth, water, temperature and nutrient. Body fats, cosmetic oils, good feeding for the biofilm and for bacteria. Now, I don't know if you can see that right at the bottom. They may have corrugated pipework. Now, there's been a lot of research into this in the past. I've done work, I've got underwater camera photographs of corrugated pipework, and they're absolutely plastered in. If you imagine the undulation, in the base of the undulation, you've got a massive amount of bacteria, biofilms growing there. So you've got to be, on top of it. And this cleansing process, when I was working with Bone Leisure, some of them were busy, but what we decided was that we would superchlorinate, we'd run the air blower, we'd run the hydromassage and the circulation system for 30 minutes, and then we would drain down every day. Okay, next slide, please. Risk assessments. Wall surfaces, as I've just said, is a major source of bacteriological problem. Need to be physically cleaned, brushed and chemically disinfected. I've got this spa balance tank alongside the filter, so you know that is a key area. System needs to be checked for leaks, etc. Next one down, please. Location access critical factor. Some of the balance tanks we came across with bone leisure were down underneath a concrete slab with a concrete manhole cover to get into the balance tank. And still people are saying, well, you don't need to clean those, only clean once a month. I can't agree with that from what I've seen. You should be designing correctly in terms of volume. So you've got enough volume to make sure you effectively backwash the filter. Don't forget, a filter can be a harbor for a biofilm. If you've got areas in a filter which have been clogged for possibly, like, you know, Steve was calcium hypochlorite or calcium grains or stuff like that, or you've got body fats in the filter, which is highly likely in a spa filter, then you've got to know that you can effectively backwash that filter. Inspections for spa bath filters every 6 months. I would say more than that, but you know, that's the very least. Okay, next slide, please. So, spa bath drained and cleaned possibly each day as risk assessment determines. I've just mentioned that. Note the air and hydro massage jet system cleansed periodically. That should be a part of the daily duties. Possible superchlorination whole system. Sorry, I repeated myself. Next slide, please. Now, the balance tank, next one, please. Okay, next one. I just want to, you know, you can get stuff which is accumulating in the bottom of the balance tank and on the walls of the balance tank. You can only see this now. It's on the right hand side. You can see a little like tide mark on the top. I've seen those where they're absolutely encrusted in fat. Next slide, please. This is one now which is not particularly clean. It was hardly ever brushed. The water, if you looked at the water in the actual spa itself, it was very, very cloudy. You know, poor pool management, spa management of the water. Next one, please. Now, some parts of the actual balance tank does go back to the, you know, it overflows into the actual balance tank from the spa into a tank. Now that's by gravity, and this is a pipe camera film of a severely contaminated pipework. This corrugated pipework should never be used. Low flows caused by by blockages. Corrugated pipework can prove excellent sites for biofilm, can lead to colonization by biofilms. Next one, please. Interactive play features. Automatic disinfection system is essential for these. I've seen some of them with a hand dosed. How they justify that, I'll never know. Never use spa if automatic control system is not working or to save parameters. Sorry, interactive water features on spa baths. Manual tests every 2 hours. Apply suitable site-specific traffic light system. That was originally developed for bone leisure because we were having so many problems where people didn't understand what they should react to as far as water testing is concerned, free chlorine and pH, etc. Tested before any bathers enter. That's common sense. Effectively maintained and checked. Hot tubs are a contentious issue of redosing. I don't know how you can say that you, in a commercial setting, you've got a hot tub and you have not got an automatic control on it. They say, oh, only small families. Well, you know, bacteria can get in through all sorts of ways. Next slide, please. Same basic principle, right? No balance tank, cartridge filters, they've got to be effectively cleaned, and there should be a regime in place for that. High risk, both in commercial and domestic settings. I don't know how we can differentiate between domestic and commercial settings. They're always a high risk. As I said earlier, some of you were talking, you know, best thing to do is if you can't effectively manage them, then you should put potted plants in them and use them as a floral display. Next slide, please. Solution to pollution is dilution. Now, if you look at this slide and you think the most common volume of a commercial spa is 3,000 litres. So if you divide 100, 30 litres per bathe per day, 100 bathers, then you get 3,000 litres. So how, you know, my personal opinion from what I've seen is that you should be diluting your spa by backwashing thoroughly every day if you've got a relatively busy spa. Relatively busy is something for you to figure out. Okay, next slide, please. And we've had these classic cases, 3 killed after catching Legionella disease from a garden centre display hot tub, which hadn't been cleaned properly. A report to Health Protection Agency said the bug originated from a hot tub on display JTF warehouse in Fenton, Stoke-on-Trent, which had not been filtered or cleaned for weeks. Next slide, please. This is one I was involved in. Spa bath left dormant for weeks, shock dose ineffectively and spa reopened, Legionella outbreak, 2 fatalities, numerous serious chest infections, 17 seriously infected, huge out of court compensation, numbers depleted dramatically, lost the customer confidence, and the spa was removed. So when this site reopened, they completely got rid of the spa because it was, you know, it reflected badly on the business and they lost a couple of £100,000, you know. But the most important thing is 2 fatalities. That's, you know, and they were 2 older people, 2 grandparents gone. Next slide, please. Generic risk assessments and controls. It's essential that all your risk assessments and controls are site specific. I see people often trying to apply generic, you know, generalized risk assessments and controls. It can't work. You've got to look at what you've got on your site, which will take into consideration all facets of management and design of the individual unit and unit system. You know, I've got another webinar coming up next month on lone working. I was talking earlier, I won't mention any names, but they were saying that they used to, you know, climb down into the balance tank for the spa to clean it when they were the only ones on site at the end of the day. So, you know, if you've got a balance tank which is down a manhole cover, then, you know, that's a confined space. You know, I'm assuming it's a reasonable depth, but having said that, it's a confined space. So you need 3 persons at least to operate that. Okay, next slide, please, Ian. Prevention, design out areas of contamination. Now, you know, I'm talking generally now. I'm talking generally, okay? Have you got pipework during this pandemic that's, you know, the heating, the background heating has come on, you know, say once a day to keep, you know, freezing and stuff like that, whatever, keep a reasonable temperature. You know, does the pipework run where you've got the cold water supply running directly above the hot water supply? What you're going to do is you are going to generate heat in that cold water system, which could lead to potential biofilm growing in certain parts. Supply appropriate training. Do your staff have appropriate training? Now, there are a range, you know, I know that Mike is here, Mike Schuff is here. I'm here representing the STA. You know, we've got CPDs on spas. So make sure interactive play features. I've got a CPD on that. If you're managing that, you've got to look at it. Small swim schools, you know, do you need to assess, you know, you're putting your pool into a new building, not a new building, a used building. Is it appropriate? Are you going to have any, like I've seen in some preschool pools, you know, they got little water features, cracking for Legionella. So, you know, make sure that your staff have the appropriate training. Appoint competent persons. Yeah, that could be an outside contractor. Risk assessed and risk controls reviewed periodically, that's standard. Ensure correct disinfection of the correct pH to all parts of any water system within the building. Have you thought, for example, of checking that, you know, if what is your free chlorine reading in your spa bath, and what's the free chlorine reading in the balance tank. If there's a great discrepancy, ensure correct disinfection at the correct, said that, consider and apply periodic disinfection and physical cleaning to high risk surfaces. How often do you scrub down your balance tank walls? How often is the balance tank in these interactive play features checked and inspected? In a season, I would say it shouldn't just be 6 months, because that means you're only doing it once a year, really. What you should be looking at, I've taken manuals off these interactive play features, and it's absolutely brimming with a fermenting massive grass cuttings, which has come off the parkland. React to warning signs as a matter of urgency. I've already highlighted these. Positive bacterial tests, cloudy water, musty smells, slime present. Those are key points to look for. Musty smells in your plant room where your balance tank is, for example. Next slide, please. Biofilms are also potential risk, high risk for internal supplies, pipework, header tanks, dead legs, showers, hoses, and fountains. I went to one site with Bone Leisure, and I looked up at a header tank. The guy didn't know where the header tank was because he'd only been working there a year. Went up the header tank, and I looked in, massive header tank, and there were 3 skeletons of squirrels in the balance in the header tank. So you can understand my concerns. Next slide, please. Just discussed interactive play features. I think a highly critical area that we must keep an eye on. Next slide, please. Showers, classic. You know, whenever I go into a hotel room, I always check the shower head. I show Ian and Mike do it. We check that. Scale formation, slime on there, perfect for a biofilm. That is a biofilm. Next slide, please. This is on a ventilation. This was on a dehumidifier. When I looked at it, took the cover off, that's for there. That slimy sputum looking material is a biofilm. Next slide, please. And this was, I don't know, but I was quite worried about this because they'd had a bit of a problem with the Pseudomonas outbreak. And when I blew got them to blow the inflatable out, this occurred. You can see the aerosol sprays coming out of the seams. So I rushed back to the car and I got my biological has filter on my face straight away. They weren't impressed anyway. Next slide, please. Filters consideration. We talked about this. Cake with body fats, ineffective backwashing, aerosols during backwashing. I don't know. Some of the bigger filters, if you've got an old filter and you're still venting the air off it, it makes you think. Close downs, is it left static or do you keep the filter running? Another good reason for leaving your system running during COVID shutdowns. Next slide, please. Nearly finished, sorry. And then thank you very much to DPL for these, hygienic way of testing the water. Don't forget contractors are at high risk as well when they tie. And this is an excellent slide, particularly on the right-hand side. He's masked up and he's got the water running down, making sure that he's protecting himself. Next slide, please. The 2 potential bacteriological tests. So we can have UCAS, which is your standard tests, and you can have your swab testing. I'll just go through this very quickly. Next slide, please. Bacteriological tests in monthly or recommended bacterial suites of tests for recommended tests or as per risk assessment. Quarterly for Legionella pneumophilia. I don't know. Anyway, I think that's contentious, because some of the sites where I've seen spas, for example, I recommend they test every month. ATP testing, which I'll come on to shortly. Next slide, please. Traditional bacteriological test, make sure you've got it up to date and you read it and the recommendations. Most of the quality firms will tell you, they'll give you a heads up straight away if they can see something developing which is untoward. Next slide, please. And this is what we've used. I used it intensely with Bone Leisure. You can get a real-time test of organic contamination within a minute. and it can, you could, the instrument on the left-hand side, you can put it into the cloud, you can send it to key people very quickly. Next slide, please. How do you prove you're working at hygiene levels? And swab testing is a good way around that. Next slide, please. Hygiene, ATP cleaning verification and COVID-19. That's a bit of market employ. Next slide, please. And I've just touched on these, just to reiterate them. Buildings closed and heated, facilities drained with remaining stagnant water, a high risk. Pipework may become heated without sufficient flows. Stagnant areas, headers, hidden balance tanks. Lead-in time for bacteriological testing. Make sure, because if you're reopening a facility, you've got to have that lead-in time to tell you that the water is bacteriologically safe before you reopen. Checks inside the water tanks, clarifiers, etc. for rust, scale, sludge, remove and disinfect. That might need at the a long shutdown. Next slide, please. Then ESCMID, European Society for Clinical Microbiology and Infectious Diseases. They've got very, very good Legionella information and COVID information. And then the next slide, please. So STA pool plant operators nationally, we've got Legionella risk and spa baths as interactive in our manual, and we also do CPDs on them. So contact Livco or myself if you need any help with that. And I'm mindful of the fact that we've got other providers here, and if you don't use the STA, then please make sure you use somebody competent and competent who I know viewing today, because it's so important that you get the training. Okay, next slide, please. Last one, I think. We've got a manual dedicated, I just said, to Legionella, spa baths, interactive water features, and CPDs. Well, I've got a range of CPDs. Next slide, please. Thank you to Dave Candle, Luke Griffiths, the STA, Ian Ogilvie, and Robin. Sorry, I missed you out. Thank you, Robin. Hygiene, they're the people who supply the swab test, and Dean Bolton of DP Leisure. Thank you very much, everybody. Sorry if I went on a bit, but I'm getting older and slower. Any questions? If you want to, Robin or Ian can transfer them to me, I'd be pleased to answer.
Brilliant. Thanks, Robbie. Superb, comprehensive and detailed as usual. Great insight. It's very, very appropriate at this point in time with a lot of our facilities that are closed. Biofilm is huge. There's a lot of stuff to take away there. I think a lot of issues in terms of that I see is the hidden pipe work for spas. I know we're supposed to be able to access all the pipe work, Robbie, for a spa, but we all know that that's not always the case. And the installations, there's many installations where you can't get into any of the pipe work, below the spa. And what would you suggest to use for biofilm removal in the hidden pipe work? Because there's lots of options, isn't there?
I think one of the best ones is, obviously with training risk assessments is chlorine dioxide.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
I'd agree with that one, Robbie. I'd agree with that one. Definitely.
I had a comment. Don't forget, I've got a CPD coming up on the 17th of February, and it's on loan working. And that's what really worries me, I mean, spa baths sometimes, or Robin, he seems pretty tidy. So we'll ask you got the responsibility, Robin.
Yeah.
Working at 11 o'clock in the night, in a balanced time.
Yeah. That's just 25 years ago, though, Robbie. You know what I mean? That's back in the day, as they say, when I was working as a minion, cleaning balance tanks on my own. Yeah, I'll be logging into your seminar, your CPD. Guys, have we got questions? I'm hogging it here.
Go on.
Can I? It's not such a question. It's I've got a bit of an unstable connection, so it may drop out a minute. Robbie, brilliant as usual. Excellent stuff. Cheers, mate. Just these sweet down.
I think we've lost you. I have to type it.
We've lost you a wee bit there, Mike. You'll come back. We'll get Mike when he comes back.
I'm here.
Yeah, you're back in, Mike. You just run that by us again.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can I?
Okay. Robbie, brilliant as ever. Thanks ever so much. Not so much a question, but a point for all the other listeners here. I had to consult last week with one of our clients who actually had a Legionella presence within the pool itself. The pool had been closed, obviously, through lockdown. It was a combination of circumstances. Circulation had been slowed right down, obviously. Water temperature dropped to about 23, low chlorination, and of those, plus a presence in the mains water supply. But it followed everything which you've been saying, Robbie. And, you know, it may be a point worth everybody else noting that because there's been no cleaning of scum lines, biofilms, surfaces, etc., during the lockdown periods, I would suggest that operators should have a Legionella test taken of the pool water before they come up to opening.
I think that's an excellent idea, because Mike, there's local school here my grandchildren go to. On the first close down, they went to open it on the Monday. They left the bacteriological testing too late, and you know, and this is not the only school in this area. There's a number of them in my county borough. They detected Legionella in the tap water. So I think that's an excellent idea.
Yeah.
Robbie, I've got just a quick question, just out of curiosity, because obviously, where's the strangest place you've ever found Legionella in a standard leisure centre?
Well, that's a very good question. I think there was one, the most strangest one. I think it was an outdoor pool with Bone Leisure down on the East Coast, but that was in the pool water, and the free chlorine was good, the pH was good. So you know, but you know, you got to, without doing a full survey, then you know, you could have had poor flows. It's like this. I think it's so underrated, you know, and I brought it up with Poo Tag. I think it's so underrated, you know, the actual dye test. You know, if you've got an older pool, I don't know why we can't sort of ask people, you know, to start doing, if they got a very old pool, then, you know, do a dye test just annually. You know.
It was in the old Poo Tag book that every 5 years, Ian, wasn't it? It was supposed to be a guidance of every 5 years for an older pool in the old Poo Tag book. I don't know if I can't remember if it's in the new blue book.
It's changed now, but I mean, I agree with what Robbie's saying, that I mean, in the older pools, if you remember, around Christmas time, we'd close for a week for maintenance anyway, and we'd always did a dye test before we opened again, always. Whereas now it's not done so much because obviously we don't close the pools apart from at the moment. But there's no reason at all why people after lockdown now or before they open should not be doing, as Robbie's saying, doing a dye test. Even in newer pools, inlets could be blocked, outlets could be blocked. Yeah,
100%. I think Dan, did you not do a dye test, Ella?
No, we were going to, but we didn't manage to get the dye in time. And before knowing that you were supplying it, I couldn't actually find anywhere that actually did it.
It's not easy. It's not easy to get.
Morrison's.
It's not easy to get, but I can get it for you, big guy. That's not a problem.
Yeah, we'll definitely want it for before we open this time coming around.
James Hadley's laughing because he can probably get it as well, as can Andrew Gaffey. But you know, I'll get it for you quicker.
Yeah, on a serious note, I think that's probably a lot of the barrier for a lot of people, that they just don't know where to get it from.
Listen, Facebook page tomorrow, I'll sort it out for you. All right.
Can you see that, Robin?
Yes, I can.
No, we can't see it, Robin. Nobody can see that.
That's got everything in it, you know. It's about 2-3 pages. Gives you how to do it, what to do, etc., etc. Time lapse. Well,
brilliant. Brilliant. Any other questions, guys? I remember.
Just a quick question. we've had a hot tub which has been closed since February last year.
Good.
We didn't open it at all in between the lockdowns or anything, because there's also got some maintenance issues as well. Like our balance tank top up is broken, our actuator is broken, so we've got like some issues there as well. But obviously the task of having to we drained most of the water out of we drained the tub, and we drained the balance tank, and we drained most of the filter. But obviously there could still be some residual water in the pipes or anything like that. And I think the process of checking all the pipe work and making sure that's safe to reopen whenever that will be near the end of this year is quite daunting. Would it be possible? Is there companies that come in and do that kind of thing where they would check all your pipe work, or what's the best process to follow for that?
I think there are numerous companies around. I mean, Sterling Hydrotech would be one. How good they are in your area, I don't know. So I don't know, sort of steer you towards that. But the other thing is, if you get it done, put a valve in so you can drain down everything, because this is a very common problem with spa baths. Very, very common. So you're not the only one, mate. But just be very, very careful, because that's exactly what happened in that bone leisure incident. It was left standing for 6 weeks, and they started up. They chucked a load of bromine tablets in it, which wasn't effective. And these biofilms reach a stage where they're virtually impregnable. Unless you put something really powerful in, like chlorine dioxide, and you get into all parts, then you've got a problem. So, I wouldn't open it until, you feel comfortable and confident and get a good company in to look at it for you. I don't know. Well, I think Mike was saying that he does consultancy. Perhaps he could help you. If you want to email me, I can, give you stuff free of charge. Just telling you what to do.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Would you mind if I have a copy of that presentation as well, please?
Oh, no, it's £50 a shot. I'm retired now. Yes, by all means, yeah.
Cheers.
I think Mike Shuff's trying to add in. Mike, you need to put yourself off mute.
Mr. Nix is here.
Yeah, Mr. Nix is in. He's in. He's getting ready.
Sorry, panicking. Don't worry.
Right.
Guys, sorry, on you go, Mike.
Tom, no, it's just to say, I think one of the other issues you got confronting you as well is that ideally all the pipework in spas and hot tubs should be easily accessible, and invariably they're not.
Yeah.
Trying to get to some of that pipework can be, should we say, tricky to say the least. So yeah, I certainly would get any one of the reputable contractors in and tell them exactly what the problem is and get them to sort it out for you. There's quite a number. Obviously James is here from Sterling, but others are available as well in whatever area you're in.
If James hasn't direct messaged Tom already, then he's not doing his job, right? Brilliant. Cheers, guys. Thanks.